Demand number 12. Worship God in Spirit and Truth. Ang sabi dito, sambahin ang Diyos sa Espiritu at katotohanan. Ibig sabihin, huwag sasamba sa likha ng tao lamang, sapagkat ang Diyos, ang Espiritu at ang katotohanan. Sabi nga sa Exodus chapter 20 verse 4, Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. In John chapter 4 verse 23 to 24, the hour is coming and is now here, when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such people to worship Him. God is spirit, and those who worship Him must worship in spirit and truth. Ang sabi dito, a true worshipper of God is seeking Him and worshiping Him through Spirit, because the Bible indicates that God is Spirit and we must come from Him through spiritual manners like praying and reading His Word, not by worshiping through man-made creation like idols. In Matthew chapter 4 verse 10, Then Jesus said to him, Begone, Satan, for it is written, You shall worship the Lord your God, and Him only shall you serve. In this verse, clearly Jesus Christ indicates that we must not conform with evil, and He says we must worship our Lord God and Him only. In Matthew chapter 15 verse 18 to 9, These people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. Don't be like these people, pretending that they are godly, but their lips, heart, and deeds manifest that they are hypocrites or mapagpanggap. In Matthew chapter 6 verse 24, No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. It is true that we cannot serve two masters at a time. It's either we serve money or we serve God. But unfortunately, many people preferred money over God because they think that their money is their source of happiness. Everyone in the world worships something, from the most religious to the most secular. All people value something high enough to build their lives around it. It may be God or it may be money, but what makes it worship is the driving power of some cherished treasure that shapes our emotions and will, thought, and behavior. Into this universal experience of worship, Jesus demanded, Worship God in spirit and truth in John 4:24. In other words, bring your experience of worship into conformity with what is true about God, and let your spirit be authentically awake and moved by the truth. The hour is coming and is now here. When he said this, he was talking to a Samaritan woman near her hometown. She had challenged him about the difference between places where Samaritans and Jews worship. She said, Our fathers worship on this mountain, but you say that in Jerusalem is the place where people ought to worship, in John 4:20. Jesus responded by turning her attention away from geography, from something astonishing that was happening in her very presence. He said, Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. The hour is coming and is now here, when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, in John 4:21 to 23. This is the radical statement to say that the hour is nowhere when worship in Jerusalem would cease. What did he mean? Jesus made the breathtaking claim to be the long-awaited Jewish Messiah. The woman said to him, I know that Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things. Jesus responded, I who speak to you, I am he. In John 4:25. So when Jesus says that the time is now here, when we will no longer worship in Jerusalem, he means that the kingdom of the Messiah has dawned and there was going to be a radical break in the way people worship. Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. The reason in that Jesus intended to take the place of the temple himself, in other words, the place where worship would happen, the place where people would meet God from now on. now on would be Jesus, not the temple in Jerusalem. He communicated this in several ways. For example, he stood in the temple and said, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." In John 2:19. The people were astonished and said, "It has taken 40 years to build this temple, and will you raise it up in 3 days?" But the gospel writer explained, he was speaking about the temple of his body. John 2:21. In other words, Jesus meant that when he raised from the dead, he would be the new temple, the new meeting place with God. Jesus said something almost as startling when he was criticized for letting his disciples pick grain and eat it on the Sabbath. Jesus' response to this criticism was to point out that David, the king of Israel, had fed his band of men with the bread of God's house that was only designed for the priest to eat. He made the connection with himself and his band of men by saying, "I tell you, something greater than the temple is here," in Matthew chapter 12 verse 6. In other words, the Messiah, the son of David, is here, and he himself is going to take the place of the temple.